Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Kevin.
I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to be presenting with you guys today. My name is Kevin Geck. I am the Principal Solutions Manager at Replicant. So I am responsible for the post-sale thinking machine project. So I live in a world of results. And that's where I want to start this talk with you today. You'll see on the screen, we have this phrase, great conversations. Now, this has a lot of meaning at Replicant. This goes back to our origin story. It goes back to Benjamin thinking about how he never had a great conversation with a machine, about how our founding team went to set out, build a product, build a platform, build a company to do just that. But when you think about the word great, when I think about the word great, that has quite the connotation. I think of great athletes. I think of Michael Jordan. I think of Michael Phelps winning gold medals. I think of Serena Williams, 23 majors. When you say the word great, you mean sustained, measurable excellence. You mean performance. And so when we talk about machines, when we talk about how we want to measure what we get out of machines, we are talking about resolution. Resolution that is quick, resolution that is natural, resolution that is in the channel that is best for the customer. And so as we get into the talk today, what we're going to talk about is our approach, that recipe that's going to get that measurable success, that resolution that's going to define great conversations. So what I want to start with today is talking about why we need a specific approach for conversation design between humans and machines. Then I'm going to get into the sauce. I'm going to talk about our specific approach, how we design conversations, and show you some examples of how it really works when we're getting in there. Lastly, I'll leave you with some takeaways as you think about your automation journey with Replicant. All right, the thing that I can't stop thinking about, the thing that I write about, that I talk to my teams about, that I talk to you guys about, is that the machine is different than the human agent. You can't really escape that. It's such a fundamental shift in the labor of the contact center to have the machine taking the call versus the human agent. The machine has specific parts that we just have to design for. That's just very different than the way you would have trained up agents in the past. So first of all, there's just a fundamental difference in what we're dealing with when we want to think about the design. The second thing, and for all the advancements that are coming, if anyone's listened to a replicant interaction between a human and a thinking machine, people just treat machines differently. They're shorter with them. They know they can escalate. They speak in weird language. They parrot the machine. We have a different interaction model. And so when we think about, okay, how are we going to achieve greatness? How are we going to produce that result? What is the process that we want to do to go about doing that? We need to think differently. And so when we talk about conversation design, like Replicant says this phrase, conversation design, like Gadi and Meghna and Benjamin have been saying it since I stepped foot in the company virtually, I guess. What does it really mean? It means an approach that is for humans and for machines. We're going to embrace the differences between the two, and we're going to help them interact better to produce the resolution that we need. So there's a couple of different parts that we go through on the project. We're going to define your business. We're going to define the flow and logic of how the machine and the human interact. Then we're going to leverage the power of AI and now generative AI to understand the language of how your customers interact with the business. Then we're going to move closer to those customers. We're going to personalize these experiences. We're going to use data and integration to make just an amazing back and forth between the human and the machine. And then we're going to make a funnel. We're going to use new types of scripts, to disambiguate, to understand, to build just a fantastic conversation in between the human and the machine. So these are the 4 parts of the process. What I'm going to get into next, I'm going to go through each of these, and I'm going to show you an example of what we mean and what we've done in practice. All right. You guys will know this. It's super cool, I think. Your agents know way more than you. They know everything. They are walking, talking encyclopedias of process, of solutions, of data, of how to move the screens around on all the apps that you have in the contact center, what to do when this happens, what to do when that happens. They really are phenomenal, and the service that they provide under pressure, under time metrics that you guys have, is really amazing. That is the baseline for what we need the machine to do. When we think about performance, we need the machine to know what to do at every turn in the conversation, for every possibility, and we need to map that out. Now, the first thing we do, one of the first things we do in the conversation design process, and for many of you have been able to work with us on this, is we build a conversation design document. We're going to create flowcharts where we map out every step of the conversation, all the different possibilities, all the business logic. Your whole business, before it gets in the bot, you kind of need to write it down. And I guarantee you, I know it for a fact, that you haven't written down every little thing that your best agent knows. It's not on a piece of paper. But that is what we need to do, and that's where we need to start with building the conversation design. Okay, so I want to get to an example to talk about some of this. So one of our customers is a BPO that provides service supply chain for telcos. So we do an outbound call to these customers to help them return their equipment. So when we started this project, we had actually a very good Word document of the script and some different scenarios. What that turned into, what we got through in the conversation design process, was a set of flowcharts where we really broke it down into 2 flows. We had a return flow and a not return flow. Now, this is an example of defining what the happy path is. You'll hear when you work with an applicant, your product manager will get on the phone and they'll say, oh, the happy path, the happy path, the happy path, the happy path. It takes a lot of work to actually think about your business, think about what your best agent would do, think about how you would optimize that just as is, and then turn it into a streamlined flow that the machine can follow. That's the first piece, and that's what you see in this first example, where the caller answers the question through the detailed process of how they're going to return the equipment. That's great. That's a good start. That's a good conversation. But where we get to great is when we think past the happy path to the edge cases, to the situations where we need to repair, to where the customer just says something out of the blue. So in this case, in the second example, the caller is going through the flow where suddenly they say, actually, I don't have any equipment. The machine doesn't skip a beat, because what we do as a part of that design process is we have all those cases, all those pieces of business logic built into the machine. What's really cool, you might think, oh, this return process, it couldn't be that complicated, right? You're wrong. We have 46 different specific outcomes that we track through a flow that most conversations take a minute or a minute and a half. That is the level of detail. That is the level of specificity that you expect of your agents. Well, that's what we expect of the machine, and that's how we get a really good result. Okay, so you see this mental model. You see when we talk about the partnership, we talk about understanding your business. We have the flow, we have the logic of how the customers are going to go and interact. How is the machine going to understand what they're saying? And is the caller going to be able to well articulate what they want? We talked about this a little bit. And I would say there's 2 scenarios that we need to think about, 2 requirements in this case. The first is when your callers know what they're talking about. They've called in before. They've followed the process. They have their account information actually pulled up with them. They remember all of that. That's great. And we've used tried and true models for intents, for entities, for transcription, to help people move through the conversation, to understand the different things they say when they're able to well articulate. But again, that's good. It's not good enough. So many callers, so many people when they're calling, they don't understand the process. They're nervous. They're scared. I got a baby crying in the back. When we listen to calls, you hear anything and everything when people are interacting with the machine. So what we need to do, what we're increasingly using generative AI to, is to support those uncertain scenarios, the implicit context, the times where the person has a hard time really articulating what they want. We build all of that into the flow to support the efficient moving of the person from beginning to end. All right. The example in this case, travel and hospitality, making a new reservation. So a couple comments on this. The first thing is, I can't remember the last time I booked a reservation by phone. It's not something that most people would expect that they're going to be able to do with a machine. Just think of the information set that's here. We have all different types of rooms. We have all different types of ways people can represent the number of people that are coming, the dates. Even if you think about it, when I think about the drop downs on a website, the mental model that I think about is you're guiding through the person blind the process. The person has their eyes closed. All they can hear is the machine. Can they understand explicitly every single time what the machine is saying? That's the bar that we're setting when we build these conversations. So we do a couple things to help make it very clear what the machine wants, what the machine needs to get the person through the process. The first thing is we do something called signposting. So this is a phrase, if you worked with us, we say this a lot. We want to define very explicitly, in very short and clear terms, what the machine is going to do with you as you go through the conversation. The next thing that we're going to do, and you see it in this first example, is we want to suggest the possibilities in a conversational way. So we say, someone calls in, they don't know if they can make a reservation or not. We can say, I can help you make a new reservation. And so in this case, in the first example, we see the bot suggests, I can help you make a new reservation. The person says, make a reservation. There's no ambiguity there. We're helping live in a world of more certainty. We have a language of the business that we define for the caller as they're going through. The second example, a piece of uncertain information. The machine asks, what check-in and what check-out date did you have in mind? The person says, Friday and Monday. Any agent, any person would be like, this Friday? This Monday? What are you talking about? I need to check that for a second. This is a generative AI-powered turn. This is just phenomenal. I think we can't say enough about the magic of this, how cool that the machine, with these new models, can understand context, can understand implicitly what the person is saying. The machine could be wrong. The machine could have, maybe the person meant the next Friday and Monday. But it really is slick. It really is a great conversation to just kind of catch, I caught that you were talking about these dates, confirm it, and move forward. When we have the power of generative AI, in these conversations, they're going to be much more clean. They're going to help people communicate where they are and help them move forward in their conversation with the machine and drive great results. Okay, so I'm talking about a lot of complexity here. I'm talking about flows. I'm talking about logic. I'm talking about generative AI. And that is all part of the process that we work through with you in the implementation. But any great technology is complex under the hood and simple to the caller. most people have iPhones here or any thing that you use. It's so slick, it's so easy to use, and you know there's just so much going on underneath. That is what we think about with personalization. You would have noticed in these conversations that you just saw, the machine is leading the caller through the process. What we want to do, what we want to put forward to create short conversations, thinking back to that definition of quick and natural, is we want to be one step ahead of the caller to get them through the process, to get them to resolution as soon as possible. I have two heuristics, two aphorisms, two things that I like to say when I think about how we trim down these designs and create really smooth experiences. The first is never have the machine ask a caller a question that the caller doesn't know the answer to. Never ask a caller a question they don't know the answer to. So think about that for a second. It's non-obvious. If people know the answer to the question that you ask, they won't say customer service representative. I guarantee it. If you make that question super clear, super contextual, just so blaringly obvious that they have no choice to say the next option, to say their answer, they will not escalate. That is one lens that we look at when looking at these scripts to make sure they provide a great conversation. The second thing is a more general kind of computing saying, is that you never want a machine to ask a question it already knows the answer to. So we've all gone through dumb IVR experiences. We've all had to repeat ourselves. When we think about designing these conversations, we really want to focus on keeping ahead of the customer, bringing data from your integrations into the call, and asking very specific questions, again, to help towards resolution. So what does that look like? What does that look like in practice? So here's an example from auto insurance. It's a policy modification. So this is an example where the caller is calling in. They have a policy with this company. They want to take a vehicle off a policy and bring a vehicle on a policy. And we were just talking about something very similar in one of the talks about the complexity of this information. Tanya was mentioning year, make, and model, all of these things. You can imagine where people could get confused about what they're talking about. When we're designing these conversations, we have specific methods to get the information from the caller and get it to them in the right channel. So at the beginning of the call, again, we're signposting. We're going to tell them, here's what we're going to do as we go through the process. We've already looked up this caller via API. So we have their information about their policy. We're going to say, I see 2 vehicles in your policy. This year, make and model, this year, make and model. Which one would you like to select? You can imagine an experience you might have had in the past with an automation or a human where they pull up your file, they don't look at it really, and they just say, oh, well, what would you like to do? That's unacceptable. The bar that we need to, think back to the definition of our interaction model we have. Humans are just going to have a higher bar for the machine, and they don't know the process. You can't expect them to understand or remember. If you just did this prompt and just said, oh, what vehicle do you want to remove? Oh, is the 2017 F-150? 2016 F-150? Escalation. Escalation 9 out of 10 times. People don't have the time. They didn't like it with your agents, but they stuck with it because they didn't have a choice. They know they have a choice, so they'll get out of it. We can't afford to have stupid, unspecific questions in our conversation design. We can't afford to have impersonal questions. So what we do is we're going to use words like which to select between 2 things. It's like a radio button in visual design, but with voice. The next thing we're going to do, again, going back to our definition of the best channel to collect information, we're going to try to figure out, okay, what is the information on the vehicle we want to add? We're going to get year, make, model, VIN. It's complicated. It's not really a good voice use case. Even when you listen to these types of calls with human agents, you can imagine the person being like, okay, is that Did you say X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Shifting between screens, tapping in the background. It's not great. What we can do, what we can design in these scenarios is we understand, first of all, that the person is on a mobile phone. We know that type of information we need to collect, and we can just offer that to them right away. They accept. And we see in this use case, one that you might think might not be that successful. It's actually very successful. 75% of the time, people convert through this flow. So again, when we talk about the taking something complicated and underneath and making it simple, that's what we're doing here through those integrations that we have with you, through all that data we have, in order to create a personalized experience that people just can't say agent to. All right. So last thing. I purposely put the script at the end. And the reason why I do that is because that's the thing that you all know the best. Like Lucas was mentioning, you guys are very familiar with scripting. That has been the language of the contact center since contact centers were invented, as we saw in that video yesterday, which was great. We do need the script. The script is inherent in all these different processes that we are going through here. But what we need to do is, I want to harken back to what Benjamin said at the beginning yesterday. We need to meet callers where they are. It's not good enough for the bot to just say, how can I help you, get some vague things, and just move forward with the conversation. No matter what models you use, the machine needs to get close to your customers. It needs to understand who they are, where they are, what they need, and move them through the transaction. And so the concept that we use, the way that we talk about this, is the funnel. And those of you who have worked with us know that we talk about the conversion funnel as our mental model for how we move people through the flow. And what we'll do is we'll implement new types of scripts to understand the caller's persona, understand their intent, and then move them through the flow, whether that's a resolution with the machine or a transfer to an agent. Okay. One last example here. So this is with a client in the health benefits space. We did a use case about giving out benefits information during an enrollment period. So folks are calling in. We went live, it's like 6 or 7 weeks before the turn of last year. And what we noticed when we went live was that a lot of people were calling in, and they were calling in for the next year's benefits. So they were calling in, they're talking to the machine, we're not finding their information. They're getting transferred over to an agent who tries to look them up only to tell them that they need to call back in the next year. That's not great. That's not great. That's something we want to fix. And when you think about how would we know exactly the person's persona, exactly what's going on with them, we just need to ask specifically. We just need to use a concept of a funnel with specific questions. This is the part in terms of the partnership where you guys know who your different personas are, but it seems like that's not always just a question that you ask. We just need a few questions to ask who you are, and then we can figure out exactly what would be the best resolution for you. So in this case, what we introduced were just 2 questions at the beginning of the flow to try to figure out, okay, are you calling on behalf of yourself? Are you calling for benefits for this year? This worked really well. When people were calling in, the people who were calling in for next year's benefits, they could have the machine just read back to them like, hey, we're working hard, call back next year, and people could just hang up. Now, I think that's kind of a big shift to, it kind of reminds you of deflection, of containment, of previous automated solutions. But if you think about the alternative of having them wait on hold, talk to an agent, look up their file, see that they're not eligible yet, have them tell them to hang up, it's a great use case for the machine. This funnel where we understand persona, where we understand like what they need, and then see if the machine can handle them first before getting them over to an agent, again, helps us drive the results. And only in a few weeks during hypercare, we were able to get things going really well for this client. Okay. This is great. This is a great process. Worked with many of you on this. But going back to what the definition of great is, what does people who are great all have in common, is they work really hard. And they work really hard over a long period of time. They take feedback. They're not afraid to learn. They're not afraid to make a mistake and learn from that and move forward. You get out what you put in. I think that's really true. Like, this is what my job is. This is what I've been like living and breathing with you for the last 2.5 years, like on these projects. It's just a lot of work to really understand your callers at this level, to build these automations, to perform, to do something great. And as Benjamin and Magna talked about, we are just at the first step of a journey to go from great to literally Star Trek. I mean, we are on the way. It is fantastic. But in order to get there, we need to spend time. We need to work together to understand your flows, to understand the language of your business, to tighten up those conversations, to focus on resolution to get the results that we need. And so what I leave you with, what I hope to continue working on with all of you in the coming weeks, months, and years, is that it just takes a lot of work to be great. Any questions? Yeah.
Earlier in your presentation, you talked about building out a flow, and that it might have potential 46 objectives, I think you said. Mm-hmm. How does building in the AI into it simplify that process versus extremely complex flow chart? How are you still accomplishing the potential of those 46 objectives, but not having to build that into the flow chart, 100% of them? How is this being simplified in today's Replicant 2.0 world?
So I'll talk first about the Replicant 1.0, and then I'll get to 2.0. So, and what you have to do in both. In both cases, this thinking, this process to understand all of your scenarios, what's the happy path and what is not, is a thinking process you'll have to do in both cases. So when we go through this, when we talk about the happy path, we intentionally focus on the big cases, most important cases by volume first, and then tackle the tails as we go through in testing and hypercare. And so we might document all of that first and then bring it into the system second. So whether you're in 1.0 or 2.0, you're going to do that. What 2.0 is, it just supercharges this process. It allows us to move all of this forward. It allows us to tackle more of those cases, to spend less time like thinking about the intents so much when we have zero shot. So I see it, I mean, I'm so excited. It's just a massive accelerant of what we're going to do, and it'll allow us to capture that complexity much more quickly than we would before.
Always that aspect of it, and allows you not have to think through every little step of the way, but there's still a lot you got to take into consideration.
We still need to think through your business. Yeah. We still need to understand those flows. But in terms of the time we might spend building those models, thinking about these different intents, we can shift that time to focus on different things. So it really will allow us all to accelerate our process. Yeah.
We showed a lot of examples of how we're now able to support different modes of interaction with the customer.
Does conversation design change depending on the mode?
Absolutely. I think something that we explore, we've just scratched the surface of, is like what Benjamin and Magna were talking about, is what is the right mode for the information capture that you're going for? Before, when we couldn't like take a picture, this idea of like taking a picture, extracting that information, using it in the conversation, that's been a pipe dream. What we can do, I mean, even that example I showed with the policy modification, just understanding at a given case, what is the information that the machine needs to collect, and knowing that, okay, we need to shift modes. I think what we do intentionally, what we will be able to do more and more and more as the speed and cost of doing some of these complex things, speed goes up and cost goes down, is we'll be able to just dissect for every piece of information that we're collecting, what's the right mode. And that's the most, that creates, again, a natural and quick conversation. For a human, it makes a lot of sense to do, when you don't have to think about what you're doing and you just do it, you just answer the question, yeah, I'll take the text message. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll snap a picture. That's a great conversation. So we're just, again, starting that journey to get there. All right, well, thank you very much. I think it's lunchtime.